It's been a while since I do a food or breakfast sketch. I feel like it today. We'll do a simple sketch. Let's go. So this is my huge breakfast from Privé. It's at the Botanical Gardens in Singapore. I was out walking the dog with the family and well, we enjoyed this huge breakfast. So let's sketch this. Well, first we're gonna put down the pencil line. I'm in a phase right now where I'm putting down pencil just to be able to get my ink drawing more accurate and also allows the ink to flow more freely because there's already a pencil guide underneath it. The most important tip I can give you with a pencil line is that you can draw a circle without having to break it up like the plate. They are protruding leaves from the vegetable and the bread and so on, but you don't really have to, stop the line, so to speak, and use your pencil and just draw a big circle. And then when you draw the ink, you can actually just break it up because now you can, you know exactly when to start and stop with your pencil, your ink lined. So when I'm inking the pencil lined, in my mind, I'm thinking a few things. One is I want to be very clear with the organic versus non-organic shape. For example, the circle has a very very smooth curved line and it represents the plate. In fact, it's a little bit oval in nature because you're not looking at the plate straight down perpendicularly, but you are looking at it from a side at an angle. But in contrast, it's comparing geometric shape of circle, oval, and so on. You have to contrast it with organic shape. The organic shapes are such as the leaf right here, as you can see. In simple drawing, you really don't have much to show for. So you don't really want to draw too many geometrical shape. It doesn't really contrast. A square doesn't really contrast too much with a circle for a sketch like this. But a organic shape like the bread and the leaves will contrast nicely with a smooth curved line of the circle, oval, and so on. So that's one thought. The other thought is that I just want to be able to separate out the shape. So the egg from the bread, from the leaves to the half tomato, the bacon, and so on and so forth, right? So you just want to be able to separate and distinctly draw the shape so that when you color it, it is clearly different objects on the plate. There's a few other organic shape. There's a couple of small holding plates, one to hold the poached eggs and the other one to hold the beans that's underneath the bacon. So the way I'm thinking about it is that, think organic, think geometric, and that's one. The other one is to separate all the shapes so that I can color them distinctly and separately. And you notice that I'm going from big shape to small shape. Start with the biggest shape, the plate, and then the next big shape would be the bread, and then the small plate holding the poached eggs, and so on and so forth. But oftentimes you get bogged down with tiny little details, texture on the bread and the little leaf, and so on and so forth, that we get the big picture wrong. You want to get the big picture right, and you can afford then to have the small things slightly mistaken, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, the sketch looks still pretty much like a plate, and the sketch still look pretty much like a breakfast. And even if you run out of time, it will still look like a plate of breakfast because you've got all the big ingredient in place. The small little details can either come from memory if you run out of time in the case of live sketching somewhere, or in the case of breakfast, when you're hungry, you just want to eat it. So you may not have time to draw every single detail, right? I noticed I have a little mistake and a protruding edge of the small plate, and I corrected it. Okay, I'm going to start with my standard technique of shadow first. I mixed myself a very muted grayish purple with a blue thrown in, with a red thrown in, and there's a bit of green and yellow and all kinds of color in it. But muted color for pretty much a shadow tone. And I'm going to use this to go in as a first layer to indicate the structure of the sketch. Although it's a very flat plate, breakfast on a plate is not very high. So even with color, with lights and shadow, it doesn't really have too much of a three-dimensional sense, but there is still a sense of 3D, if you like, and shadow is the best way to represent it. Most of the time when you look at a photograph or your object for sketching, you will note that it is very clear where is shaded and where it is in the light. They are sort of binary, 0 and 1. Of course, there's an in-between between the two shade and light spot in the middle, but you can kind of ignore that, and you can think of it as a binary, light in the light or in the shadow. And so therefore you can actually use your shadow to denote the three-dimensional sense of how something pop up. Well, your piece of paper or sketchbook is 2D, but your sketch should make it look more 3D by using the appropriate shadow. That really is the only way I know, the simplest way I know to make a sketch pop into 3D. Well, at this stage, while I wait for the shadow color to dry, I also couldn't help myself, but I was drawing a few lines here and there to indicate how the poached egg, for example, is curved three-dimensionally, and I use a very, very light bluish neutral wash to indicate that. You can draw with a small brush. Lines indicate direction or the shape, and it gives you a bit more of a form as well. So as you curve around the lines of the poached egg, it allows me to indicate three-dimensional sense for those eggs. That's just an example how you can use line to do that. Okay, the next bit is to start to color. I'm going to start with a bit of the green, go with the leaves. That's rich green gold, I think that's the color, and a touch of lemon yellow, and that's spring green, if you like. Especially where it's lit up and it's not shadow, it gives you a sense of very bright green. That represents the part of the leaves, the greens, the salad that is indicating where the sun hits it. The bread is basically consisting of quinacridone gold with a touch of maple yellow and a bit of lemon yellow thrown in. I am ignoring the texture for now. It just goes straight in, including the shadowed area in one wash if I can. That's just a very simple wash to indicate the bread. The texture will come later, and we'll probably darken up the edge or the side of the bread as well in a little bit. Well, as I continue to color my breakfast, I'm gonna mix a light brown for the hash brown, the piece of hash brown, and then I'm gonna mix a bit of reddish mixture for the beans underneath the two pieces of bacon on top. Notice that when I'm painting, I go with the entire shape. So in the case of the beans, although I have drawn the beans in there with individual beans observable, you can see it, but actually when you paint it, I just paint right through it. I will separate them later on with a bit more of a negative shape around the beans, but it's easier and it's more beautiful aesthetically if you treat everything as big broad shape rather than individual shape. There are ways to do aesthetically pleasing small shape, but most of the sketches in watercolors are much more aesthetically pleasing if you treat them single shape and separating them out with a negative shape, if you like, which are darker, as you see shortly. The piece of tomato, round and red, I've made it a little bit more brown than I can, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, you can see that it's just a piece of tomato. There's some texture, some pepper on it, but ignoring that for now. I continue to lay down more colors. Some purple begins to appear because, as you can see, the salad consists of both green and purplish shade leaves, and some of them I don't really have ink lined, but it sort of get pushed to the back because the ink line brings the shape forward, and anything that I sketch without ink line pushes it back to and to the back, so it becomes sort of a foreground and midground, if you like, separating them. Simple ways to do that. I continue to drop in more darker tone colors for the various parts of the sketch, the side of the bread, and the mushroom at the back. They are shaded, so I kind of use a darker tone as well, slightly muted, and those are the sketches, little touches that hopefully will separate out the shape, and your audience will see that they are also separated shape, and not just one piece, if you like. They are actually distinct pieces of stuff on your plate. Okay, the bacon is, I think, the hardest part of the sketch because it has got some complicated color. I mixed Naples yellow with quinacridone rose. That gives me a bit of a flashed color, and I didn't just plonk it for the entire shape of the bacon, but it's in strips or in lines, and that's how I observe the bacon's color and the shape, and that's what I see. And it's sort of in a way there are little strips of the muscles or tendons and or fat, if you like, and I'm not quite sure, and they form sort of a more realistic sketch of the bacon if they are in strips, in lines. I'm also putting in a bit more darker spots for the hash browns, and texturing them at this point as a second layer on top of the first wash. Okay, at this stage I want or intend to create more three-dimensional objects out of the sketch. I'm thinking in terms of shadow. I'm thinking darker shadow, maybe not the darkest of the darkest shadow, but more like a mid-tone, and I'm laying lines that are indicating shadows for the poached egg, and also underneath the small plates, if you like. I'm mixing a bit of a cobalt and a bit of red thrown in, and that becomes an indication of where I think the next layer of shadow lies. I'm kind of just drawing a little bit with them, actually, and I'm not really painting, but more like drawing at this point. They are almost texturing, and that's just at this stage where I don't intend to put out more broad shape, maybe a few more to come, especially the darkest dark, but I am thinking shadow, I'm thinking negative shapes, I'm thinking readability of the object. How do I make sure the beans are readable, the texture are readable, and the dots, and so on and so forth. All these are basically just a very enjoyable process for me, as I am just looking at a photograph or looking at my still life, and I'm just putting on the color. I'm trying all the time to make the three-dimensional picture pop. It is two-dimensional, but you're trying to make it feel like 3D. Okay, the darkest dark are coming in. I'm mixing a bit of green, a bit of neutral tint, and I'm gonna go in to paint the two small pots. They are the darkest dark, if you like, and I'm also at this point thinking broad shape, right? Obviously I'm not trying to draw tiny shape with it, but I am trying to cover as much ground as possible. I'm already on the smaller brush, the number 6 travel brush from Escoda, and I'm just doing the negative shape around the poached egg, thereby making the poached egg pop, if you like. And the dark shape, although they are not the darkest dark, passable on my palette, I am just trying to create the sense of small little container, plate, if you like. It's on plate on plate, right? They are porcelain, so there's a bit of reflection. You'll see later on I will use some highlights to indicate that they are porcelain. Many a times painting is like problem solving, if you like. You're trying to solve myriads of problems, And the problem here that we're trying to solve is how to make the sketch look three-dimensional. The other problem that we're trying to solve is how do I try to make the sketch looks more realistic with highlights, and it looks like a piece of bread, or it looks like green salad, or it looks like tomato, bacon, and so on and so forth. So the problem solving part is never ending in a sketch and in a drawing or painting. I'm splattering at this point to indicate the dots on the bread. I'm splattering with a bit more darker color, and I think, you know, doing that, you need to be very careful that it doesn't get out of the bread, right? I water down the same color, and I drop a few more splatter, so that it is not just one tone. In other words, the splatter is not just a single tone of dark or black, but it has got varying degree of values, if you like, and in reality that's how bread looks like. I'm going in also to kind of darken the edge of the bread to make it look more like a slightly burnt on the outside, on the edge. And yeah, that's really continuing observing the sketch or the photo, and then trying to mimic as much as I can, picking up little things that will make the sketch look more three-dimensional. Well, at this stage I thought that the background's a little bit too plain, so I wanted to indicate a bit of a sense of direction. If you look at the grain on the table of the photograph, you'll see that it's actually there are lines on it, lines on the table, that is. And I intended not to capture the same thing. Being lazy, I'm just going to do a few lines to indicate the direction of the plate, and also to make it look maybe three-dimension, contrasting the background color with the foreground plate, if you like, and making the plate pop up in the air, so to speak. Because there's shadows and there's lines, your eyes will see somewhat of a three-dimensional object in the sky, or not, well, above the paper, if you like. I felt that the side of the bread's not dark enough. I darken it further. So at this stage, I'm taking a pause while allowing the sketch to dry. That's one of the most important lessons in watercolor: learning patience. I don't really have a lot of patience, so it's a very hard lesson for me. Took me a long time to learn that one. I hope that you guys out there will have a lot more patience than I do. Anyway, while I wait for it to dry, I put down the date, July 1st, and my name. And we're gonna put in a bit more highlight after this. Okay, so at this point, I think it's more or less done. The last bit to do is to darken the lines on the bacon, because I've used opaque colors. Maple yellow is opaque, and it has covered up the lines, and I wanted my ink to show distinctly on the sketch, so I have used the ink to go through the line that's sort of disappeared somewhat. And draw a bit more of the texture on the bread, and do a few more lines here and there to see, just to make it real. I'm using Copic white, my trusty opaque white, to go in and do a bit of highlight, specifically around the porcelain plates, the two small plates, one for the beans and the other one for the poached eggs. The white highlights will, which where the porcelain captures the sunlight, will make it look more sort of realistic. It looks more porcelain, and it looks more, or metal, it could be. I think they're porcelain. So and a bit of highlight here and there on the butter, the pack of butter on the side, the right side, and then there are highlights on the tomato as well, dots of them. So I use that to kind of just put it down, right? Basically just to indicate the various highlight and so on. Okay, so that's the little trick you can do. You can use various white, titanium white, or gouache white would work just the same, just as well. Fantastic. I hope you enjoy that little simple sketch, a little bit of a tutorial to go with it. I hope you can sketch your breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it is that you fancy. You can do it from photograph, which is what I normally do. Artists should never go hungry. So thanks for watching to the end, and have a good one and a good day wherever you are. Bye.